Excellent. Welcome everyone to ArbTech's session on NFTs and the Metaverse. We are privileged to have an absolutely all-star panel with us today with Primavera De Filippi, Joseph Raczynski, and Federico Ast. This is not our first NFT panel with this crew. We've had a couple of sessions previously with Fede and Joe, but we are delighted that Primavera is able to be with us today. I just wanted to say very quickly that Primavera has another engagement in 30 minutes from now, so she will have to leave us midway, but we're going to start with her primarily so that we can get the benefit of her views. I'm going to introduce our speakers and we'll let then Sean McCarthy, who's moderating this session, get away with our panel. Primavera is a researcher, director at the National Center of Scientific Research in Paris. She is a faculty associate at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard. She is a former member of the Global Future Council on Blockchain Technology at the World Economic Forum, and she's a founder and coordinator of the UN Internet Governance Forum's Dynamic Coalitions on Blockchain Technology, much easier to say with its acronym of COALA. She wrote a book in 2018, Blockchain and the Law, a seminal book on the topic published by Harvard University Press in co-authorship with Aaron Wright. Joe Raczynski needs no introduction to most of you. He is an innovator. He is someone who speaks widely and blogs widely on the future of technology, legal technology, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and now the metaverse. Under the umbrella of Thomson Reuters, he consults with top law firms in order to customize Thomson Reuters solutions, legal technology solutions for enhanced workflows. He hosts as well a show called The Hearing, a legal podcast, which is greatly entertaining and which I recommend for you if you are interested in the cutting edge development in this space. Federico Ast is the CEO of Kleros, the legal tech company that uses game theory and blockchain technology in dispute resolution. I'm reading from his blurb. He's very wisely avoided the word arbitration. And thank you. Thank you for this, Fede. Fede is based in Buenos Aires. He graduated in economics and philosophy, and he holds a PhD in management. Sean McCarthy, our fearless moderator, is an Irish barrister and a New York attorney. He is a former deputy counsel of the ICC Secretariat in Paris, previously acted as a legal consultant in the blockchain sector for a Swiss blockchain for supply chain startup. He's a current ICC YAF representative and ArbTech moderator, and we're very privileged to have him with us. Sean and I published quite recently a joint blog on the impending Binance arbitrations, and I can vouch for his knowledge of our topic today. Please, Sean, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Sophie. And I just wanted to echo her sentiments. Thank you all, both the speakers and to the audience who've tuned in today. I think it'll be a great session. So let's dive in. For those who have seen just the poster, we're talking about NFTs and the metaverse. And for those who maybe are not so familiar with how NFTs might come into contact with the metaverse, really NFTs are what we might term as the building block of how we might have a digital life, because they are the ways and means, currently at least, for owning digital assets and creating digital assets as well, and obviously also trading digital assets that are much more like digital real property rather than something like a cryptocurrency, which is more like a currency. So as we move with NFTs from a trend of digital art, we've seen things like Beeple, we've seen things like CryptoPunks. These were JPEGs, GIFs, Now we're moving much more increasingly into a utilitarian, into a productive digital asset space, where we're looking at metaverse land plots, we're looking at tools, we're looking at clothing, we're looking even at pets, everything that we might need to live our meta lives, as it were. And the nature of what we consider as an NFT will, or is already changing, but will undoubtedly continue to change. And I think so too, in this conversation, we need to talk about the legal status of these assets and how these interactions that we will have in the metaverse will change how we look at NFTs especially. So first of all, in terms of our first question for the speakers, is the metaverse a gateway into educating the general public about the true necessity and utility of NFTs? And are they the most important foundation stone of this digital world, along with cryptocurrencies? So perhaps Primavera, you might start and give us kind of an idea of what you see the utility and the necessity of NFTs in the metaversal space.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, basically today we have we have a lot of platforms that are at least trying to establish themselves as the dominant players in the metaverse. And the problem today is that it's quite problematic in the sense that most of the assets that we theoretically own on those platforms, we don't really own them because they are completely controlled by the operators of those platforms. So if I own the outfit of a particular brand for my avatar in Fortnite or Roblox, in reality, I don't actually own any real asset. And this is a problem because that means that all my properties are stuck into that particular virtual world, and there is no transferability and there is no interoperability. I cannot move my assets away. I cannot display my asset in a different platform and so forth. And the benefit of relying on something such as NFTs is that the assets are actually recorded outside of the platform. They are recorded on this distributed database, that's the blockchain. And that means that any platform that decides to interoperate with that blockchain will be able to recognize the actual ownership of those assets and therefore enable me to wear my outfit, which I own on the blockchain on multiple one of those platforms. And so today, given the current, at least centralized approach to asset ownership in the metaverse, NFTs represent at least one way in which we can move away from actually integrate a real notion of property and like virtual property in the metaverse, which do not depend, and I think that's very important, which does not depend on intellectual property. So it is not about owning the content, it is not about owning the rights over the content, but it's really about owning a copy of that content which qualify as a particular asset.
Super. Thank you very much, Primavera. I think that's a great primer for the audience. It's touching on a lot of the subjects that we'll talk about later into the session. Joe, perhaps where do you see NFTs and the metaverse coming together, and have you seen anything interesting coming out of these different platforms and how they're trying to, as Primavera has said, solve this centralized to decentralized problem?
There's a ton that's happening right now. So we're talking about, and I'll give you maybe three if I can think of off the top of my head. So first was the tokenization was a thing until it wasn't a thing, and then it's probably going to come back when we start to figure out some of the rules and regulations around this space. So we think about that CryptoPunk that you just talked about a little while ago. Back in 2017, they were free. Now, you think about the cheapest one, I just looked it up, whatever, every day, they're $370,000 US to buy one of those things, which is out of reach for all of us. unless you're Federico. I'm just kidding. But no, seriously, it's extraordinarily expensive. So how in the world can any of us attain some of those things? So the idea is, can you fractionalize, can you tokenize an asset like the NFT that is a CryptoPunk, one of, let's say, 10,000? So that's one thing that we're starting to see some transformative effect in. Another is community membership. So more and more, we're starting to see some of these NFT projects. So maybe it's an issuance of 1,000 or 10,000 digital pieces of art. And there's a theme to that. And maybe it's a bunch of artists that have come together. Maybe it's a singular artist that's developed something in Paris and they've pushed it out and they've minted those things. Well, maybe there's a theme behind that. And if you get an NFT that is minted on the day that it comes out, or in the secondary market, you decide to buy that, and it has a particular attribute or something that's unique about it. Maybe it's a hat that someone's wearing. That means you eventually get to meet up with that artist on location in Dubai, or in London, or in Ibiza, or however you pronounce it. I always say Ibiza, but I know that's wrong. So all of these things are sort of coming together. In fact, there was something recent that was fascinating. There's an issuance of these 10,000 NFTs, and there were 9 that had this hat that one of the most well-known, his name is Seed Phrase, in the CryptoPunk world, came out with this set of 9. So of the 10,000 that were issued, 9 of them had this hat that he's known for. And if anybody were to get this or buy it on the secondary market, they could join him behind stage at a rave, right? To each their own. If that's something you're interested in, well, this whole idea of community membership is going to be a part of that. The last one that I'll sort of mention in this space, as it sort of moves in that direction, is probably over the next several months, Twitter is going to be launching a verifiable avatar, which means that if you've bought an NFT that's an avatar that you like, that you enjoy, and there's tens of thousands of, probably millions of them out there that you think is great, it's something that represents who you are, what's something you enjoy, you can prove that that is yours. It's in your digital wallet. You have ownership of it. And now Twitter can say, oh, yes, Joe owns this, and he wants to put it up as his avatar going forward to build that sort of dialogue about that individual. You could do so. And now it's provable. So it's something that's translating into a real use case there as well.
Fascinating, Joe. Thank you very much. Federico, perhaps in a similar vein, similar question, where do you see the crossover these days from NFTs into this metaverse world? Obviously, we're going to talk about disputes. We're going to talk about living more of our lives in the metaverse as we go through the session. But perhaps maybe any opening thoughts from you?
I mean, about 5 or 6 years ago, someone interviewed me. I was just starting my work on centralized justice, and it was Max Kaiser actually, and he asked me, so what is the vision of what you are like building? I mean, and I told him, imagine when we are in a virtual reality world, and then I have a dispute with another user in this like metaverse world, and then this kind of this dispute I can have is going to be solved by an AI, right? And I mean, the guy was looking at me like, this guy is crazy. But over time, these things started to becoming more real, and a good way of trying to see what is going to happen is by reading or watching science fiction movies. And I think one of the movies that is predicting what is going to happen in the next years is Ready Player One. Ready Player One is this world where everyone is in this metaverse, and they have like their real world, identity, which is a very sad world that they don't really like, and they're poor, but they live the reality in the metaverse. That's where they define themselves as humans, and that's the world that is more meaningful for them. And this is something that we are seeing that is happening now. Imagine 6 years ago, it was a crazy idea. Now it's happening. And I mean, all of this convergence with the NFTs is going to define what is going to be the legal order that is going to rule on this, I mean, metaverse world. And in a situation where we don't even know now what is the world we consider more real, either or like mid-world or the socially constructed world we call metaverse.
Absolutely, and again, you've touched on a lot of interesting points where the parallel with Ready Player One is so clear, and I think it'll become much more culturally relevant as time goes on, and we're going to talk about, I think, companies that want to get into the space and want to rule if the digital world becomes so strong as it probably will be. Companies like Facebook who want to get their piece of the market. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but perhaps let's dig straight into these legal questions that both Primavera and Federico kind of touched on. We're absolutely one day soon going to see the administration of justice, the resolution of disputes, contracts, everything you can imagine in terms of a social or legal interaction. I'm sure we will see one day soon in the metaverse. So maybe again for Primavera and her great expertise on kind of the crossover between law and NFTs, law and the blockchain. Could you just take us through, maybe Primavera, the couple of types of ownership, the legal mechanics of owning NFTs? Maybe if you have an example of some type of ownership of something in the metaverse, maybe something like a Decentraland plot, and any other types of ownership that you have seen, and what kind of difficulties they raise, and what kind of groundbreaking things that they might be doing.
Yeah, I mean, basically the problem is there's a distinction between owning the NFT and and being able to use whatever the NFT is associated with. And this essentially goes towards licensing, right? So owning an NFT is it's owning a token. It's not extremely controversial as such. We have like quite established example in some way. Like, it's not that much different from owning cryptocurrencies, except that it's like related to a particular non-fungible token. The challenge though is what happened, like what are the rights that are associated with ownership of this token, right? And so for instance, it could be like a piece of land. I think perhaps even more interesting could be like something related to a brand. Or like something that involves some kind of trademarks or involves some kind of copyright associated with it. And the interesting thing is that owning the NFT by itself doesn't give me any rights about that, and that means that I could purchase the NFT that represent I don't know, a Gucci bag on a particular metaverse, but the owner of the NFT, I can prove that I do own the NFT that is associated with a particular Gucci bag, but it doesn't give me as such the right of displaying this bag, and it, most importantly, doesn't give to the platform the right of displaying it, right? So if I buy a particular NFT directly from Gucci, and then I expect that I can visualize it in Fortnite or in Roblox, they don't actually have the right of visualizing the brand. And so the challenging question becomes, how do we actually associate specific licensing right, because in the end it is IP, whether this is about trademark or whether it is about copyright, so that just by the act of owning the token, the user, but it's not just the user because I'm not the one visualizing it, but the platform in which the user is interacting acquire the rights of visualizing this without having to enter directly into a partnership or contractual relationship with the brand itself, right? And this is not impossible, of course, but this is challenging because it's different from the traditional IP licenses in which it's a personal license, and you have like the IP holder that is licensing the right of visualizing a particular brand or a particular content to a third party. In this case, it's about the need of incorporating the rights within the token and creating the specific public license, a little bit like Creative Commons, but more specific, where anyone that owns the token has the right to do specific things with that particular asset that it is associated with, but most importantly, that the platform that are intended to recognize those tokens also have the right to visualize it, right? And this is challenging because today it has not been done yet. So we have a lot of NFTs that represent branded items, like for other things, but in reality, they don't actually provide any licensing rights to the platform themselves. And so there is kind of like there is currently a gap in terms of designing specific licensing scheme in order to allow for those digital assets not just to be owned in terms of owning the token, but to actually acquire and automatically license the right to whoever needs to render them in a particular virtual world.
Fascinating. And just maybe a quick follow-up question from me. Would the fact of having a decentralized platform, a decentralized metaverse, would it ease some of these licensing issues, do you think? Or really it's much more about trying to fix it from the beginning, from a legal conceptual point of view, that we need to fix this licensing issue? Or is it more that we would be kind of fudging making a piecemeal solution if we just had a non-centralized platform that we could display these things on, and nobody would be able to be legally stopped from or the platform owners are decentralized, and therefore they don't have to worry about being sued or breaking any IP laws, traditional IP laws?
I mean, they will still break them. It's just that they will be harder to get. Yeah, I mean that doesn't solve the problem. That just makes it more complicated. Sure. But no, I don't think. I think it's not an unsurmountable problem. It's actually an interesting problem because it's really creating this hybrid type of licensing, which is in between a public license, but it's not a public license like the general, like the GPL or like the Creative Commons license, which applies to everyone, but it's a public license that applies specifically to the owner of a token. And so the license follows the token, and ownership of the token should give to a third party, which in this case is whoever is responsible for the virtual world rendering, to also visualize whatever brands or copyrighted content is associated with that NFT, which today doesn't need to be. The token itself doesn't incorporate, doesn't think that there is no trademark or copyright violation for owning and transferring an NFT, because it doesn't actually reproduce the content. But whenever you actually want to bring this NFT to use, especially in the metaverse, which is different from the art world, because in the art world, you don't necessarily need to visualize as long as you can prove that the hash is the one of a particular digital content. Whereas in the metaverse, the main reason that you own an NFT is because you want to visualize it in a particular virtual world, and ideally more than one. And so it's not enough to have partnership. It's not enough for like Gucci to make a particular contractual partnership with Roblox or Fortnite. You actually want something that can be visualized in any potential current and future virtual worlds, and that's where a particular licensing scheme needs to be devised.
Absolutely. And even, I mean, if this problem is solved, I can imagine that the value creation element alone makes NFTs even more valuable than they are now, because you carry that, potentially can carry that NFT across your whole digital life on any number of platforms. So I can see a digital Gucci bag, for example, being a lot more expensive than a real Gucci bag if these problems are solved. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Primavera. Great insightful points there. Perhaps I'm mindful of the time with Primavera needing to go in 5 minutes, but perhaps Federico, for you, again, as we touched on at the beginning, we're going to see communities live these digital second lives much more, and they will own, as Primavera talked about, digital assets. They'll have to interact with these digital assets. The digital assets themselves will have to interact with the platforms. We're going to see disputes. We're going to see fraud. We're going to see all these types of things that we see with real assets in the real world. How do you see digital dispute resolution, metaversal dispute resolution playing out?
Well, I imagine that this is going to be resolved by people that are also in that metaverse, right? So these are situations that happen in what I'd say. Well, Primavera is here, but it's in the world of the Lex Cryptographia. So it's in a world that is hard to to grasp and to address by traditional systems of resolution, like typically built on nation state, jurisdictions, and the nature of these conflicts and disputes happening in metaverse is going to be, I think, impossible to solve, by traditional arbitration. I always put this example. Let's say I have a dispute in a metaverse with another user, and because I claim that he plagiarized some work I did and put it into NFT and sold it, and this is an anonymous user. I mean, I don't know who this person is, and if I happen to find out that maybe this person is in, I don't know, in Philippines, in Zimbabwe, in Argentina, or whatever, and it's very hard for go to have this person sign a arbitration agreement with me and then try to resolve this into a traditional jurisdictional arbitration court. So what part of the work we are doing at Kleros is try to produce the tools that are going to be needed for resolving disputes that, because of their nature, they are like native to the to the metaverse world. And we can speak later if you want about Kleros has one way to address this. It's based on game theory and crowdsourcing. There are other ways to address this, but some of these methods will need to be leveraged to solve disputes that are very different to what the world has seen so far.
Absolutely. No, and I think if we have time towards the end of the session, we definitely want to hear a bit more about Kleros's way of solving disputes with game theory. Primavera, I see that we're coming up to past, and feel free to leave us and to get back to your busy work. But thank you very much for taking part, and we'll have to have you again on another session.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
So Joe, again on this administration of justice, legal world in the metaverse, you did a recent blog that was very, very interesting, talking about the metaverse and bringing in the concept of DAOs. And I thought it was really, really interesting in terms of, obviously we think, I think, at least in my own mind, the parallel of Ready Player One that Federico mentioned, of that, the fact that we would live personal lives on in the metaverse, but who's to say that we wouldn't be doing business in the metaverse much more. So the idea of a DAO, and again, maybe for the people in the audience who may not be overly familiar with what they are, I'm sure you can give us a quick definition of what they are and what they do. But how do you see DAOs in the metaverse and their place in kind of bridging this gap between traditional business, traditional companies with digital decentralized companies and communities?
It's a great question. DAOs are going to be absolutely fascinating and wild to watch over the course of the next few years. They're already going on. They have been going on for some time. The first one was a disaster, but so DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, sounds just like a scary concept, I think, for all of us. Even the first time I saw it, and I was sadly a part of one way back in, whatever it was, 2017, I don't remember at this point. This is the idea where all future asset ownership is within a collective. So people are able to vote on things. It's almost where we get to the point where, dare I say, code becomes law. The concept being that a group of people can participate in an activity, in a business, in a concept, or whatever it might be, and you are taking ownership of that by buying into it. So you're either given tokens or you buy the tokens. And what those tokens allow you to do is vote on things, essentially. That's what we're really talking about. There are some pluses and minuses to that, as you can possibly already think about. But to me, in a perfect world, and we're looking at it from this glorious way until we get to the part that gets a little more frightening, and we'll certainly talk about that. But it's an egalitarian means to allow everyone the possibility of participation in decisions and ownership, which I think is amazing. And in and of its concept, to help people across the world for more equality, for greater participation, all of that can come to fruition with a DAO, in my personal opinion. So by buying these tokens or earning these tokens, whatever the case is, I'm able to vote on something. And like I was saying, it's where you get to the point where code becomes law. And this is where the metaverse will probably take on a big component of this. It will exude this. We're seeing this starting to take place in IRL, so in real life. I hate saying that, but I said it. But the point is that, and I mentioned this, and I went to my first in-person talk panel, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago in Boston, and obviously in the United States. And it was surreal because there were about 50 people in person, and there were about 150 people virtual. And I mentioned this, it was the first time when you do this type of thing, right? So I'm doing some of these talks like everyone else here a lot over the last year, 20 months. You don't get the collective gasps. So I said this, and I firmly believe this, that my personal belief is that a DAO will purchase a Manchester United or a Dallas Cowboys or a Chicago Bulls within the next 5 years, which is a fascinating concept in that these DAOs can raise inordinate sums of money. I mean, very quickly, people are like, you know what? I want to do this. I want to develop a DAO, generally code-based, run by a few people initially, that allow them to collectively make decisions to do something. And if you're able to do that with huge amounts of money, you could do things like that. And one last example I'll give on the DAO front is that a DAO, I think it's called DAO Constitution or something along those lines, Constitution DAO, yeah. They are trying to buy one of the 500 copies of the US Constitution. So there's 500 that were ever in existence that were copies, right, of the original, and then everyone signed them. So they want to buy one. And they've already raised tons of money so that anybody who has a token that says, hey, I'm able to make the decisions on this, help make some of the decisions on this, I will also have potentially ownership of that too. So if it goes up in value, yes, but I'm also able to contribute. So it's a real buy-in from a community about a typical idea or an idea that comes up. So I'll stop there, but it's going to be amazing, especially for the legal community. And I keep telling people in the legal community, if you have not read about this, not gone down the rabbit hole on it, please do so. It's going to be really important, I believe.
Absolutely. No, I fully agree. And I think your prediction, I think, will be probably much less than 5 years that we will see something momentous in the real world being bought by a DAO. Federico, I'm sure you have other trends that you've seen, other things that you think are fascinating in this space. Please go ahead.
I mean, I think that Joe is spot on this, because DAOs are the new corporate law. I mean, these are the new ways in which humans collaborate to produce, results and to reach some common goals. So it used to be that they went to some government office and register a company. Now you do this online, and you do this on a jurisdiction that is the metaverse or the internet or whatever you call it. And everything that happened traditionally between companies, it's going to happen between DAOs. There's going to be a DAO purchasing a token or an NFT representing something, and there's going to be another DAO who is going to claim that it had some rights over that token, and now you will have a dispute between two DAOs, as you used to have disputes, or as you have now, a dispute between companies, and these disputes are solved by arbitration, and probably these disputes happening between DAOs are going to be solved by some way of arbitration. So we're like seeing the reconstruction of corporate law into the metaverse through these new concepts, but in the end, it's not very different to what already the essence. It's still how can we better organize and how can we better structure the way in which humans collaborate to reach common goals. So it's going to be really interesting. And I also, so as Joe made the prediction about DAO buying Chicago Bulls or something, I'm going to predict that within not 5 years, within 1 year probably, there's going to be like a big dispute between DAOs over, I don't know, something regarding NFT or something that you would have solved through arbitration in the traditional world.
Sure, absolutely. And I mean, I think recently I saw maybe 6 or 7 months ago that quite a famous DAO, this Pleaser DAO. So they're patrons of People Pleaser, I think she's an Asian artist who has done things for Uniswap, a lot of major projects. They bought an unreleased Wu-Tang Clan album, and I believe they're going to do some very, very interesting things with that. So we're already seeing just the tip of the iceberg. Maybe when we're talking about kind of this bridging the gap between traditional business, traditional companies, and DAOs, Facebook, it's Facebook, or now as we should call them, Meta, are the new kid on the block. And I'd just love to get both of your thoughts on kind of what you think their motivations are for getting into the space, and whether you think it'll be all positive, all negative, a mix of both into what they will do in the metaverse as a major tech company who have their own ideas, probably not decentralized, probably much more centralized. And I'd love to just get both of your thoughts on it. Joe, if you want to fire ahead.
Yeah, in some way, this made things a little bit easier, because when I started talking about sort of the metaverse, which that long ago, but maybe like 5 or 6 months ago, people thought that I was losing my mind. Like, why? Because I would speak to large law firms, and I said, "Hey, have you seen this thing that's going on?" I would lead into like, let's talk about cryptocurrency, blockchain, and cryptocurrencies and NFTs. And you're like, "Oh, we have no idea. We don't." And with much respect, we don't get NFTs. When you go from NFTs to the metaverse, it's like, what are you saying? But there is total logical progression as we're obviously having this. It makes complete sense. So what Facebook has done is it's made it much easier to have the conversation with people, because once people, even though you love them or you hate them, it's an organization that people know has monumental impact on the way that things happen. So if they say something or they do something, then more than likely all of us have to sort of lean into it, or at least embrace it in some form. They tried to do that with their own token, and you saw what happened, at least in the United States, with lots of people saying, "Hey, there's no way that you guys can do this. We'll have to figure that out later." So they are. But with this, you're seeing Mark Zuckerberg is making this leap, which is a total logical leap for all of us. And if you've ever put on these masks or donned these things, even a few years ago, you put the thing on and you're like, all right, it's heavy, it's bulky, it's kind of whatever, it feels really weird. But you enter this universe, this world, and you're in it maybe, let's say, for 15 minutes or an hour, and you get out of it and you're just like, everything seems bland. And it's horrible to say that, but it really is that sort of transformative thing. So what they're doing is they're seeing this natural progression from, I think about when my first job, they issued me a BlackBerry. And then I got the iPhone, whatever it was, like, I didn't get the iPhone, I got an Android device 14 years ago. And that was a major leap. So touching a piece of glass, you're like, wow, I can do all this stuff with a piece of glass. This is that next leap. And while the hardware is there, it's going to get much better in the next several years. Apple will more than likely come out with their own, they call it Apple Glass, so at least that's the code name for it right now, in the next 18 months, which at that point in time, you're going to see everyone saying, okay, now I sort of get it for both business and as well as pleasure, gaming, all that stuff. We usually see gaming do a lot of this. They're going to see many use cases for the business world, especially as we're doing these types of Zoom and everything else, and people may be tired of that at this point. And whether or not we're back in full time in 6 months, we'll see. But they are ahead of the game for good reason. Mark Zuckerberg sees it. That's why he purchased Oculus so many years ago. It was a little ahead of the curve on that one, but it is bleeding in that direction, and we all will be down there in the not too distant future.
I mean, I think that this has been, Zuckerberg's vision for a long time now. And as Joe said, the buying Oculus, I think it was maybe 2013, something like that. It was really like, it was a long time ago. And also there is a very famous, conference that Zuckerberg did at Barcelona, the World Mobile Congress, where he had the whole room put their masks. And, if you were seeing carefully what Zuckerberg was doing, it was like he was already working to this direction. Like this was, I think this was Facebook's vision for a long time now. And the thing is that we don't realize that we already are in a metaverse. I mean, we already are spending most of our waking hours on Twitter or on some social media, and so maybe the interface is still not, VR as we think Ready Player One, but that's only a matter of improving the interface, having more like cheaper headsets and cheaper, computing for this requires a lot of computing power, having a VR world. But we, in our social interactions, we already are living in a metaverse. I mean, I have more interactions with you guys than what the lady who lives across the street. I have no idea who she is, but I spend more time around Kleros. I mean, Kleros is a company. We're 20 people, and we are distributed in like 10 countries. And we, all of the Kleros members, they speak more to each other than what they speak to their families, probably, right? So socially, we kind of already are living in this metaverse, only that we don't call it metaverse because we have this idea of the metaverse with the VR helmets, but in many ways this is already here and has been here for a long time now.
Absolutely, and I mean you're absolutely correct when you said I think it was about 2013 that Oculus was bought by Facebook, and then we had that same year, I think it was Google Glass, the augmented reality kind of normal glasses with the little screen. And I think that augmented reality will also, I think, have a big resurgence, and we will see it a lot in the building and design space, where people are kind of doing meetings and visualizing things not just on a PowerPoint, but in front of everybody in a 3D environment, but everybody sitting in the same room. That kind of very, very seems very easy, but probably very, very difficult. And as Federico says, a lot of computing power involved. Sophie, I'm sure you have a question. Please fire ahead.
I wondered, thank you for allowing me to butt in, but while we're on that topic, one thing that I find interesting, obviously from a dispute resolution point of view, but more generally about what's going on in the metaverse, owning NFTs, or that's one aspect, but just living there, is how do you anticipate, and I haven't seen anything written about this, maybe Joe, that's going to be your next post, how do you anticipate, if any, that there will be interaction between that parallel world and what we call the real world? How is that going to play out? Because at the moment we're looking at the metaverse like you're going through an invisible door and boom, you are in this world, which is coherent in itself, which is an ecosystem, or at least we envisage it like that conceptually, or maybe that's wrong. I mean, how do you anticipate the crossover, if any? If we are right that a lot of people will want to live there to enhance their lives or just to have a different personality, then it may be that they will be silos. But I'm just interested in how you conceptualize it. Joe.
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question. So it's one of those things that I thought a lot about. And as we start to go down the road, yes, as you're completely immersed in the virtual world, so to speak, that's one use case. Now, the mixed reality is the second piece of that, and that is being able to, so let's say there's just 5 of us here, and we all want to meet, and we all have our avatars, whether they're real life avatars that look really close to what we look like, or totally something different. We're all seated at a table, and we're having this discussion. And the table looks real to me. So I'm sitting at this table, and I'm able to, let's pull up a graph about something, about viewership, whatever, and we're all able to tap into that. So you're able to see the table, you're able to see that virtual reality graph. That's kind of a cool use case. But the part that to me resonates the most is, I do a lot of this, unfortunately. If I have to fix something around the house, let's say my sink, the trap under my sink is not working. So I can wear these glasses, and it sees the trap that needs to be replaced, and it sees it itself, and it's able to say, okay, Joe, you need to unscrew this with a wrench. And so it points out exactly what needs to happen. It says you need to replace this. So it's also using some auditory stuff, and it's guiding me through the process of replacing that part of pipe. And so it's this mixed reality of seeing the physical world, but projecting on top of it things that look like they're a part of it, but they're not. And then what Sean was talking about was the augmented reality, and that's the Google Glass. So there's like 3 classifications. That's the 3rd one, and I sadly have a pair of them sitting in my closet right now. But and they were extraordinarily goofy. I remember walking into a store with them. I was like, I just want to see what happens. And I did not pay for this thing that they were given. And I put them on, and people constantly would come up, like, let me try. I was sort of germaphobe, so like, maybe I'll try. But what they did was just put a little bit of information, because it knew where I was. So if I was walking down the street in front of a sandwich shop, a chain, it knew that I was in front of it. And so it knew by GPS that I was here, and it said, hey, you come in now, and here's a 2-for-1 deal. And all it was a little bit of advertising to give me awareness of the space. So those 3 separate things, I think there'll be use cases for each one of them. The sad reality, as we go 10 to 20 years out, is much more of it will be probably the virtual aspect, which will become, as sort of Federico just said, the reality. Our normal daily lives are living in that. And that's the part that gets a little dystopian, which I don't want to go down the road of right now.
Fede?
Yeah, I mean, this is like totally Black Mirror kind of situations. Google Glass, I think it failed, in my opinion, because people felt really uncomfortable, like seeing others with glasses, and I mean, they could be recording me at all times. I mean, I don't want to be recorded all the time. So I don't know. Maybe now we got more used to all this. I mean, we have our smartphones all the time with us, and each time you are at a restaurant with other people, but you are looking at your smartphone, screen, then you are really into the metaverse, right? Even because you're not paying attention to the real, and you're paying attention to the screen, which is the metaverse. So I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but this is how we humans are structuring our social interactions with others. And there is a hypothesis called the Fermi hypothesis that it claims to, it's about why haven't we found any like extraterrestrial aliens? Why didn't we find the life on other places? There are different reasons why this could happen, but one of them says that, well, maybe because when you are a civilization that you have advanced to a certain level and you have developed the metaverse, then you just don't want to get out. I mean, you have no need to explore other worlds and other planets if you already have everything you want into your Google Glass or your Oculus. So I don't know. It's dystopian, maybe it is. I don't have a really good answer for that, but this is the way in which things seem to be going. To me, what is more concerning is like one company owning that metaverse. Because that company, if it owns the metaverse, it owns the legal system, right? It can, well, decide to dispute however they want. It can ban users at their will without really giving any explanation to anyone. So that's the thing that is a bit concerning to me. And if we are going to effectively live into the metaverse, let this metaverse be decentralized, owned by the users and not by one company, and let the legal system for this metaverse be a construction of all users and not something that is imposed on us. That's the how I would want the metaverse to be structured where I would live.
That's a huge point. And I know that you probably have some other questions, but I just want to jump in real quickly. I apologize. It is a huge point because we're at a point like an inflection point in time where we can go down two different paths. So that we've started to build, we as in the collective masses of people that are involved in this, have already started to develop these portions of the metaverse, right? So different components inside. Sometimes people, of course, built that digital land, all that stuff. But then you have a large organization like Facebook coming in to play in this space. What are they going to do? If you listen to Mark Zuckerberg during his announcement of the rebranding of the company and all those things, he made it sound like some of this could be open to that interoperability so that you could port over NFTs of art or music or whatever the case into this space. But I hesitate because I think we know how the business operates. And so a little uncertain about how the direction of that's going to be, because the future is these places. And there's so much, it's basically replicating the entire world. Everything that we have in the entire world now, you're replicating into a new world that's virtual. And so every aspect that's in there, someone could own that or take responsibility of. And so those are the things that we had sort of grappling with. And yeah, so Federico, I totally agree. It's going to be an impressive time to sort of watch and participate in over the next several years at least.
We have a question in the chat, Sean. I don't know if you wanted to pick it up perhaps for our speakers.
Yes, exactly. And it picked up on Joe and Federico's point. Decency, thank you very much for writing in the chat. And again, anybody in the audience, feel free to write a question in the chat. We want to make it as interactive as possible for the last few minutes. But Decency wrote that, what about a country owning a metaverse? And again, I could absolutely see it. I could see a country creating a digital version of their own country in the metaverse. And now, why they would want to do that, maybe it's just a tourism style thing, or maybe it's something else, but I could definitely see it happening. And again, this question of centralization versus decentralization, who owns the legal system, who controls the legal interactions, the social interactions, these are things that are really, really, I mean, critical. And I think we have all taken for granted from the beginning of the internet that it was really a decentralized world where it easily could have been controlled by one or a monopoly of small companies. And I think we as the general public, the people around the world need to probably realize that if the metaverse becomes quite an important thing in our lives, then we probably should be fighting politically, socially for it to be decentralized and it to be not controlled by one entity, because if that happens, then we're in a very, very slippery slope to kind of, I don't want to overblow it, but just into a kind of an authoritarian system rather than something that the creativity of people can be utilized. We don't want very, very tight controls really in a digital world, at least to start with. We want to see what people's creativity creates and
how you fight that fight is not an obvious proposition, though.
No, exactly. Where do you lobby? Where do you discuss these things?
When you were talking about countries and the likes of Facebook and the sort of resources that they have, it's quite an interesting. I mean, that in itself is an interesting question: is how do you keep it decentralized if that's what you want? Anyway, Any views on the country owning the metaverse, Joe and Fede?
I have a tangent thing, but go ahead.
I think that this is kind of this discussion again. It looks like the discussion in the 90s. Internet versus intranets in companies, and then private blockchains versus public blockchains. And so, country metaverse is another way of saying intranet, but in the metaverse era. A country-owned metaverse is not going to be very interesting for users. I mean, for a country-owned metaverse, you have a national territory and you have a state. That's the country-owned metaverse. So the interesting thing of metaverse is just the possibility it gives users to interact with people regardless of where they are and regardless of any boundaries. So a country-owned metaverse is probably going to be a marketing stunt for some country, but in the end is going to fail to attract lots of users, I believe.
Yeah, and I'll follow on that because it's sort of a tangent of it, but the idea being that we're pushing people further and further away from countries or cities that have crazy taxes or are very expensive. So people are going to continue to be magnets to areas that are less expensive to live in, because if you're doing these things, you're able to do all these things remote or live in this completely virtual world for 8 hours a day or whatever it is, maybe far more than that at some point in time. Then why do you live in New York City? Why do you live in Buenos Aires? It's like, it's a challenge. Or London, right? London's very expensive. It's just one of those things, like, does it make sense to do that anymore? So you start to think about how that's going to impact tax bases and cities, and all of those things start to sort of change as well. Real estate, everything.
Absolutely. No, I think we could do multiple sessions on this. I mean, even alone, Primavera's points about the licensing elements of NFTs across different platforms, and whether an open metaverse would be kind of only a stopgap solution, and how we're going to be able to allow people to own digital assets across their digital life. I think these things we're just only scratching the surface. But perhaps maybe for the two of you, do you have any kind of parting points, anything that you think we should look out for in NFTs in the metaverse space, and especially, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of lawyers on this call. What do you think that they should be looking out for in the next 6 months, a year, 2 years?
I think that I think lawyers should read more science fiction books and watch more science fiction movies. That would be my advice for lawyers. The law is going to, law was invented because of a function to help human societies their goals. So the moment law and the existing legal frameworks start to become not helpful for the goals that new human communities have, well, that's when law either adapts or it becomes not used anymore, right? Because people are going to find other ways to solve problems. And especially Sophie has educated me a bit on how arbitration started. Arbitration started as a very flexible way to resolve disputes where you wanted to have some specialized person solving your dispute. And I saw that arbitration has also become a bit more like a court proceeding, if you want, which was not the early idea. And so maybe it's a good time to go back to the first principle thinking and see what problems arbitration was meant to solve in the first place, and then see what this solution looks like in the metaverse world.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the whole idea around the sci-fi angle, be it books or movies, definitely will set the context for where we're going, which is both frightening and also delighting in some respect. I don't know. But one thing that I'll bring up that's kind of a random one that I just learned about recently, but was encouraging for people, and this happens too frequently, where people lose assets these days in this world because you are essentially the owner of wherever that asset is, because you have both the public and the private key. So if you were to lose the private key to, be it the NFT or be it tokens of Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever you want to go down the road of, there's something afoot that I met with this individual, and they're doing derivatives. So imagine you lost, goodness gracious, let's say you lost $1 million US of Bitcoin or of Ethereum or of a token. That token we're talking about that represents the NFT. There's ways of now, through cryptographic proofs, saying, okay, this is definitely was that individual's. They lost it. It's unrecoverable. So they're doing tokens about those tokens at a 10% rate, saying, yes, we can pull out from that and now sell and monetize that. Kind of a cool thing. It's really kind of far out there, but neat to see that they're moving in that direction with some of these things that people have lost in this space.
I just wanted to say, oh, sorry, Sean, you're muted. And now you're frozen. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Sorry, Sophie, go on ahead.
No. I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for putting your questions in the chat room. We are we're now out of time, and I'm going to close the meeting. There was a question about jumping from one Decentraland to another. There's also a question about public law on the metaverse. What would be an important public legal norm, and how do we articulate it? We could easily, I think, have another session to address all of these. I wanted to thank everyone, really, our speakers, most of all. Thank you, Fede. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Sean, for your moderation. Thank you, Primavera in absentia, for your fantastic insight. And thank you to all of you for joining. And I wanted to leave you with a scoop. ArbTech is going to do a session on dispute resolution on the metaverse, where we are very keen to address these questions. To us, this is our chance, a blank slate, to finally get rid of the cost, the time, the burdens that have troubled not only arbitration, of course, but the courts that we don't seem to be able to solve, address those disputes that are arising in this new space. We're going to talk about these things and more on the 15th of December. And it's going to be a Zoom event in association with law firm Mishkon Dorea. And so please watch our space on LinkedIn and Twitter, because we're going to be posting announcements there. And thank you again, everyone, for showing up. Sean, please close if you'd like. Thank
you very much, Sophie. I don't think you could have put it better. Yes, it's going to be a great event, and I'm certainly looking forward to being in the audience and seeing a stellar panel and some really, really fascinating topics being discussed. Thank you to both Federico and to Joe, and also thank you to Primavera again. And I'm sure, as always, we're going to continue this discussion in some form, in some medium in the near future, and maybe we'll even do it someday soon in the metaverse. Thank you all very much, and see you then.
Thank you all.